Joseph Zeeler. First, we'll delve into the shocking story of Joseph Zeeler, a man convicted of the brutal murders of an 11-year-old girl and her babysitter over 3 decades ago. Joseph Zeeler's crimes date back to 1990, when he committed a heinous act that would forever scar the lives of 2 innocent victims. On that fateful night, Zeeler sneaked into a Cape Coral condominium where 11-year-old Robin Cornell and 32-year-old Lisa Story were sleeping. What followed was a brutal and senseless act of violence that would haunt the community for decades. Zeeler, driven by a dark and twisted motive, raped and murdered Robin Cornell and Lisa Story. The details of their deaths are too gruesome to recount, but suffice it to say that their lives were tragically cut short by the hands of a remorseless killer. For years, the case remained unsolved, leaving the families of Robin and Lisa desperate for answers. It wasn't until 2016, when Zeeler was arrested on an unrelated matter, that a breakthrough finally occurred. As part of the arrest process, Zeeler was required to provide a DNA sample, which ultimately linked him to the crime scene. The discovery sent shockwaves through the community, as the long-awaited justice seemed within reach. The trial of Joseph Zeeler was a highly anticipated event, drawing national attention due to the heinous nature of his crimes. The courtroom was filled with tension as the prosecution presented a compelling case against Zeeler, highlighting the overwhelming evidence that pointed to his guilt. The jury, consisting of 12 individuals, carefully weighed the evidence and ultimately found Zeeler guilty on 2 counts of first-degree murder. Throughout the trial, Zeeler displayed a chilling lack of remorse. His pitiless arrogance was on full display as he locked eyes with the victims' families, seemingly reveling in their pain. Jan Cornell, Robin's mother, attended every day of the trial, determined to see justice served for her daughter and her close friend, Lisa Story. Adding to the shock and horror of the trial, Zeeler took a disturbing step further. On the eve of the trial, he arrived with an ill-fitting veneer over his teeth, on which he had scrawled the word killer using a permanent marker. This grotesque display of his lack of remorse and his desire to taunt the victims' families was a chilling sight. The contrast between the word killer and his rotten teeth only heightened the disturbing nature of his actions.
Well, she's calling me a and a murderer, so what? I can't write that? I mean, she's calling me a and a murderer, and I'm calling her a pig for not washing her sheets.
Jan Cornell, along with others in the courtroom, was taken aback by this sickening stunt. She couldn't help but feel a surge of anger and disgust at the audacity of Zeeler's behavior. It was a blatant attempt to further inflict pain and suffering on those already devastated by his crimes. The impact of Zeeler's shocking behavior extended beyond the courtroom. In the days following his arrest, he sent 3 threatening letters to Jan Cornell, demanding that she impede the investigation into the murders. These letters were filled with vile and disturbing language, showcasing Zeeler's continued disregard for the lives he had taken and the pain he had caused. Despite the emotional toll and the constant reminders of their loss, Jan Cornell and the other victims' families remained steadfast in their pursuit of justice. They attended every day of the trial, determined to see Zeeler held accountable for his heinous crimes. Their resilience and unwavering strength in the face of such darkness is a testament to their love for their lost loved ones. But the shocking behavior did not end there. Just before his sentencing, Zeeler shocked the courtroom by elbowing his own attorney in the face. The violent outburst left everyone in disbelief, further cementing Zeeler's reputation as a dangerous and unpredictable individual. Let's run it back again. Despite the shocking display of violence, the judge proceeded with the sentencing. Last month, 10 out of 12 jurors recommended the death penalty for Zeeler after careful deliberation. The judge, taking into account the severity of the crimes and the jury's recommendation, sentenced Zeeler to death. Still, he continued claiming he was innocent, saying, "I have nothing to do with this. I maintain my innocence." However, his pleas were disregarded. According to the judge, he had forfeited his right to live. Nicholas Tuinstra. Next, L, we delve into the chilling case of Nicholas Tuinstra, a man whose heinous crimes have left a community in disbelief. In order to understand Nicholas Tuinstra's reaction to being sentenced, we must first delve into the chilling details of his crimes. The events that unfolded on that fateful day sent shockwaves through the quiet town of Green Lake, Wisconsin. It all began when Melissa Tuinstra, Nicholas's estranged wife, made the brave decision to file for divorce. She had grown tired of the abuse and turmoil that plagued their relationship. Seeking solace and a fresh start, Melissa began seeing Justin Daniels, a kind-hearted man who had captured her heart. Little did they know, Nicholas Tuinstra's jealousy and rage were about to reach a boiling point. On September 27, 2014, tragedy struck at the apartment complex where Melissa and Justin resided. Nicholas, armed with a gun he had purchased specifically for this purpose, confronted the couple in a fit of uncontrollable anger. The sound of gunshots echoed through the complex, shattering the peace of the neighborhood. Officers responded responding to the scene found Melissa lying lifeless on the sidewalk, her body surrounded by a pool of blood. Justin Daniels, too, had fallen victim to Nicholas Tuinstra's violent outburst. As the investigation unfolded, the true extent of Nicholas Tuinstra's premeditation and cold-bloodedness became apparent. It was discovered that he had been stalking Melissa, monitoring her every move in a twisted attempt to maintain control over her life. The gun he used to commit the murders was the same type he had purchased just days before the tragic event. When questioned by the police, Nicholas initially denied any involvement in the killings. However, as the evidence mounted against him, he was forced to admit that he had been present at Melissa's apartment on the night of her death. He claimed to have left before the shooting occurred, but his alibi was met with skepticism by law enforcement. He was charged with 2 counts of first-degree intentional homicide in the deaths of Melissa Tuinstra and Justin Daniels. The trial that followed was a harrowing ordeal for all involved. Over the course of nearly a week, the prosecution presented a mountain of evidence against Nicholas Tuinstra, painting a vivid picture of a man consumed by jealousy and a desire for control. When the prosecution began to detail the abusive behavior Nicholas had inflicted upon Melissa, allegedly in front of their own daughter, it struck a nerve with the defendant. The courtroom was filled with tension as the truth of his actions was laid bare for all to see. His daughter witnessed the defendant abuse her mother, Green Lake County District Attorney Andrew Christensen stated, his voice filled with conviction. In a fit of rage, Nicholas Tuinstra erupted. He shouted, denying the allegations, vehemently proclaiming his innocence. "I did not push her ever." Tuinstra's voice boomed through the courtroom, his anger palpable.
Touch her ever! You only got pushed that one time and stuck her heel.
His outburst was met with shock and disbelief. Bailiffs swiftly moved in, restraining Tuinstra and removing him from the courtroom. The trial was temporarily put on hold as order was restored. After a brief recess, court resumed, and a seemingly calmer Tuinstra returned to his seat. He took a moment to compose himself before addressing the court. "I apologize for the outburst to the prosecution. My daughter is a very sensitive subject." Tuinstra's voice now filled with a hint of remorse, though it was difficult to discern its sincerity. The prosecution, however, was not swayed by his apology. They saw it as nothing more than an attempt to manipulate the situation and gain sympathy. "It was a very aggressive and threatening stance and step toward the prosecution table," remarked Mark Slate, one of the prosecutors, referring to Tuinstra's earlier outburst. The judge, Mark Slate, observed the proceedings with a stern gaze. He had witnessed firsthand the volatile nature of Nicholas Tuinstra and the impact of his actions on the victims' families. Before announcing the sentence, the judge allowed Melissa's family to provide emotional impact statements. Their words were filled with grief, anger, and a longing for justice. "He murdered 2 people because his ego was bruised," one family member stated, their voice trembling with emotion. Another family member, Jessica Siegert, Melissa's sister, directly addressed Nicholas Tuinstra, her voice filled with pain and disbelief. "If you, Nick, love Melissa like you said you did, why would you kill her?" she asked, her words hanging heavy in the air. The judge, having heard the impassioned pleas of the victims' families, offered his own perspective on the case. During the court proceedings, Judge Mark Slate made a strong declaration regarding the defendant's lack of remorse. He stated that there was no remorse by the defendant and that he continued to blame others. With those words, the fate of Nicholas Tuinstra was sealed. The judge sentenced him to 2 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. It was a decision that brought a sense of closure to the victims' families, knowing that Tuinstra would never again walk free. Despite the overwhelming evidence and the guilty verdict, Nicholas Tuinstra maintained his innocence. He clung to the belief that there was more to the story, that the truth would eventually come to light through the appeals process.
There's a lot more truth out there, but I'll have to wait for appeals that people were not aware of.
His voice filled with a mix of defiance and desperation. Markeith Lloyd. Next, we delve into the gripping case of Markeith Lloyd and his jaw-dropping reaction to being sentenced. Markeith Lloyd's criminal history is a chilling tale of violence and brutality that has left a community in shock. Lloyd's alleged crimes are nothing short of horrifying, and the charges he faces reflect the gravity of his actions. It all began on December 13th, 2016, when Lloyd allegedly shot and killed his pregnant ex-girlfriend, Saad Dixon, outside her home in Orlando, Florida. The senseless act of violence not only claimed the life of Dixon, but also that of her unborn child. But Lloyd's alleged rampage did not end there. Just 1 month later, on January 9th, 2017, tragedy struck again when Lloyd allegedly shot and killed Orlando Police Lieutenant Deborah Clayton. Lieutenant Clayton, a beloved member of the force, was attempting to apprehend Lloyd when she was fatally wounded. Lloyd's alleged actions not only robbed the community of a dedicated officer, but also deepened the sense of fear and unease that had gripped the city. In the aftermath of these horrific crimes, years, Lloyd became the subject of a massive manhunt. Law enforcement agencies spared no effort in their quest to bring him to justice. The search for Lloyd spanned several weeks and involved multiple agencies working tirelessly to track him down. Finally, on January 17, 2017, Lloyd was apprehended after a dramatic standoff with police. The capture of Lloyd brought a sense of relief to the community, but it also marked the beginning of a long legal battle. Lloyd now faces a slew of charges, each carrying severe penalties. He has been charged with first-degree murder in the deaths of Sod Dixon and her unborn child, as well as the murder of Lieutenant Deborah Clayton. These charges alone carry the possibility of life imprisonment or even the death penalty. In addition to the murder charges, Lloyd also faces charges of attempted first-degree murder, aggravated assault, and possession of a firearm by a convicted felon. These charges stem from Lloyd's alleged actions during the manhunt and the standoff with police. During the trial, the courtroom was filled with tension and anticipation as Markeith Lloyd, the accused cop killer, made his presence known during his recent court hearing. Lloyd's outburst during the proceedings left everyone in attendance stunned and captivated. As the hearing began, Lloyd's attorney presented motions related to local news footage, wiretaps, and an excessive force investigation. However, it quickly became apparent that Lloyd had something else on his mind. Ignoring the advice of the judge to consult with his attorney first, Lloyd stood up and began speaking out.
Oh, they done took my eye. They done broke my nose, broke my jaw. They did all this shit. I resisted, but I crawled out to the motherfucking road. So how did I resist? I ain't resist shit. They just did that shit. They tried to hide it from the news people, but I'm here right now.
Corrections, I think we've established everything we need to do in a first appearance hearing. He can be taken after he signs, have him sign the no contact.
Lloyd's words were filled with a mix of defiance, frustration, and a sense of being wronged. He adamantly claimed that he had been framed for the crimes he was accused of, vehemently denying any involvement.
Now, Mr. Lloyd, do you believe you're crazy?
No.
At one point, Lloyd even delved into his experience in jail, shedding light on the conditions he claimed to have endured while awaiting trial. His words painted a picture of a man who believed he was being mistreated and denied justice. Despite the judge's repeated attempts to redirect Lloyd's focus back to the motions at hand, Lloyd persisted in expressing his thoughts. The judge reminded Lloyd of the importance of legal counsel and suggested that he speak with his attorney before making any further statements. However, Lloyd seemed determined to have his voice heard, refusing to be silenced. As Lloyd's outburst came to an end, the courtroom was left in a state of bewilderment. The judge, recognizing the need to maintain order, urged Lloyd to communicate through his attorney and advised him to seek legal counsel. Lloyd's outburst had certainly made an impact, but it remained to be seen how it would affect the outcome of the trial. As the court hearing drew to a close, Markeith Lloyd took a poignant moment to bid farewell to his family, leaving the courtroom filled with a mix of emotions. Lloyd's emotional display added a human element to the otherwise intense and dramatic proceedings. With tears streaming down his face, Lloyd turned towards his loved ones and expressed his love and gratitude. It was a heartbreaking scene as Lloyd, facing the uncertainty of his future, took this opportunity to say goodbye. After all was said and done, he was given a death penalty for the murder of his wife and unborn child, and then a death penalty for the murder of the police officer. Camia Gamet. Next, Camia Gamet, a name synonymous with murderous crimes that have shocked the world. In March of 2013, Gamet admitted to hitting Hill in the head with a hammer, a shocking act of aggression that foreshadowed the tragic events to come. Despite the history of violence, the couple remained together, trapped in a toxic cycle. The details of their relationship paint a grim picture of a volatile and dangerous dynamic. It is within this context that the events leading to Hill's untimely demise unfolded. The trial of Camia Gamet was a riveting courtroom spectacle that captivated the nation. Gamet, charged with the murder of Marcel Hill, vehemently defended herself, claiming self-defense. Her defense team argued that she had killed an unknown attacker in a dark room, reacting out of fear after waking up to the sound of glass being smashed on her head. They painted a picture of a terrified woman defending herself against an intruder. However, the prosecution presented a different narrative. They argued that Gamet's actions were premeditated and deliberate, pointing to the brutal nature of the crime. The evidence, including a bloody floor lamp and a frying pan, suggested a relentless and calculated attack. The prosecution contended that Gamet's claims of self-defense were unfounded and that she had intentionally murdered Hill. Throughout the trial, Gamet maintained her innocence, expressing disbelief at the way she was portrayed. She claimed that most of the evidence against her was lies, with only a small fraction being true. However, family members of the victim took the stand, recounting the horrifying cries for help they heard as Gamet repeatedly stabbed Hill. The courtroom was filled with tension as the jury deliberately deliberated, weighing the evidence and testimonies presented. The fate of Camia Gamet hung in the balance, and the nation awaited the verdict that would determine her future. The tension in the courtroom reached its peak as the jury delivered their verdict. Camia Gamet was found guilty of first-degree murder. The room fell silent, but Gamet showed no signs of remorse. As family members of the victim addressed the court, sharing their heart-wrenching stories of loss and grief, Gamet's eyes rolled and she laughed callously. However, the judge, Jackson County Circuit Court Judge John McBain, was not about to let Gamet's lack of remorse go unnoticed. He erupted from the bench, his words dripping with anger and frustration. He sternly warned Gamet to shut her mouth or face the consequences of having duct tape put on it.
And you're gonna shut your mouth or I'm gonna have some duct tape put on it.
Well, he attacked
All right, we'll wait here for a moment so we can get her quiet.
When it came time for sentencing, Judge McBain did not hold back. He called Gamet's crime the worst cold-blooded murder he had ever seen. Emphasizing the brutality of the act, he described how she had stabbed Marcel Hill 11 times, relentlessly ending his life. The judge sentenced Gamet to life in prison without the possibility of parole, ensuring that she would pay for her actions for the rest of her days.
You didn't think he was an intruder? You know, maybe one stab wound, okay. Maybe that's 7 defense. But you put in 11 more to make sure he was good and dead. So I agree with the family. I hope you die in prison as well. You know, if this was a death penalty state, you'd be getting the chair.
As the sentence was delivered, Gamet showed little reaction. She simply stated that she understood the court's decision and expressed agreement with the victim's family, who had hoped for her to die in prison. The judge's words and the life sentence without parole sent shockwaves through the courtroom, leaving everyone in awe of the severity of Gamet's crimes and the justice that had been served. Ashford Thompson. Next, Ashford Thompson, a convicted cop killer, recently received a death sentence as a unanimous recommendation from the jury. In the lead-up to Ashford Thompson's capture, a series of events unfolded that would ultimately bring him to justice. It all began on a fateful day in July of 2008, when Officer Josh Victarian, a dedicated and respected member of the Twinsburg Police Department, was gunned down during a routine traffic stop. Officer Victarian, a devoted husband and father to a 2-year-old daughter, had pulled over a vehicle for a minor traffic violation. Little did he know that this seemingly routine encounter would turn into a tragedy that would shake the community to its core. As Officer Victarian approached the driver's side of the vehicle, he was met with sudden gunfire. Ashford Thompson, a 25-year-old man with a troubled past, opened fire on the unsuspecting officer, striking him multiple times. In a matter of seconds, the life of a dedicated law enforcement officer was cut short, leaving behind a devastated family and a community in mourning. Thompson, realizing the gravity of his actions, fled the scene, leaving Officer Victarian to succumb to his injuries. The news of the officer's death spread like wildfire, sending shockwaves throughout the tight-knit community of Twinsburg. The Twinsburg Police Department immediately launched a massive manhunt to apprehend Thompson and bring him to justice. The search for the cop killer spanned across multiple jurisdictions as law enforcement agencies from neighboring towns and counties joined forces to track down the dangerous fugitive. Days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months, but Thompson remained elusive. He seemed to have vanished into thin air, leaving investigators frustrated and the community on edge. The relentless pursuit of justice for Officer Victarian became a top priority for law enforcement officials, who were determined to bring Thompson to justice. Finally, a breakthrough came when a tip led police to a home in Bedford Heights, where Thompson was believed to be hiding. A SWAT team was assembled, and a tense standoff ensued as negotiators attempted to coax Thompson out of the residence peacefully. After several hours of negotiations, Thompson finally surrendered, ending the months-long manhunt. He was taken into custody without further incident, and the community breathed a collective sigh of relief, knowing that the dangerous cop killer was finally off the streets. The capture of Ashford Thompson brought a sense of closure to the grieving family of Officer Victarian and provided a glimmer of hope for the community. However, the road to justice was far from over. Thompson would now face a long and arduous legal battle as he stood trial for his heinous crime. As Ashford Thompson stood trial for the heinous murder of Officer Josh Victarian, he faced a multitude of charges that reflected the severity of his actions. The prosecution presented a compelling case, meticulously outlining the evidence against Thompson and painting a chilling picture of a cold-blooded killer. Thompson was charged with first-degree murder, a crime that carries the most severe penalties under the law. The prosecution argued that Thompson's deliberate and premeditated actions demonstrated a complete disregard for human life and the safety of law enforcement officers. In addition to the murder charge, Thompson also faced faced charges of attempted murder for the injuries sustained by Officer Victarian during the traffic stop. The prosecution argued that Thompson's intent to kill was evident in his use of deadly force against the officer, leaving no doubt as to his malicious intent. Furthermore, Thompson was charged with illegal possession of a firearm, as the weapon used in the crime was determined to be unregistered and obtained through illicit means. The prosecution presented a compelling case, backed by forensic evidence, eyewitness testimonies, and ballistics reports that linked Thompson to the crime scene. The jury was presented with a clear and damning narrative of Thompson's guilt, leaving little room for doubt. Throughout the trial, Thompson's defense team attempted to undermine the key prosecution's case, questioning the credibility of witnesses and challenging the admissibility of certain evidence. However, their efforts proved futile in the face of overwhelming evidence and the emotional impact of Officer Victarian's tragic death. Despite the defense's efforts, the jury saw through Thompson's facade of false humility and recognized the arrogant and callous disregard he displayed for Officer Victarian's life. After careful deliberation, the jury reached a unanimous verdict, finding Thompson guilty on all charges. The courtroom erupted in a mix of emotions as the guilty verdict was announced. The victim's family, who had endured months of pain and anguish, found solace in the knowledge that justice had been served. The community, too, felt a sense of closure, knowing that a dangerous criminal would be held accountable for his actions. With the guilty verdict established, the trial moved into the sentencing phase, where the prosecution sought the harshest punishment available, the death penalty. The defense, on the other hand, argued for leniency, citing Thompson's troubled past and the potential for rehabilitation. After careful consideration, it was decided that Thompson's sentencing would take place in the Summit County Courthouse. This decision was significant, as it meant that the case would be heard in the jurisdiction where the crime had occurred, ensuring that justice would be served in the community directly affected by Thompson's actions. The judge carefully considered all the arguments presented before making a decision that would shape the course of Thompson's life. After weighing the evidence, the judge announced that Thompson would indeed be sentenced to death, in accordance with the unanimous recommendation of the jury.
Your Honor, just execute me there, because I can't get any kind of justice. I'm tired. I'm at the end of my rope. What can I do?
On the day of the judgment, Thompson remained seated with his arms crossed, displaying a complete absence of emotion.
We, the jury, being duly impaneled and sworn, find the defendant, Ashburn L. Thompson, guilty beyond a reasonable doubt of the offense of aggravated murder as charged in the indictment.
Thanks for watching. Click on the videos on your screen for similar content.